I still remember the exact moment I first laid eyes on Sarah Crawford. It was at the annual Lakeside Children's Hospital Charity Gala in downtown Chicago, one of those black tie affairs where Chicago's business elite gathered to network while pretending it was all for charity. I was there representing my firm, Westbrook Financial Partners, where I'd been working as a senior financial analyst for nearly 7 years. The ballroom of the Drake Hotel was packed with the usual suspects: banking executives in custom tuxedos, marketing directors draped in designer gowns, and the occasional celebrity brought in to boost donations. I was engaged in mind-numbing small talk with a commercial real estate developer when I saw her across the room. Sarah stood out immediately. While most women at these events blended into a sea of black dresses and conventional elegance, she wore a deep emerald gown that perfectly complemented her auburn hair, which fell in soft waves past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that captured me, a mesmerizing shade of green that seemed to shift between jade and forest depending on how the light hit them. There was something magnetic about her confident posture and the thoughtful way she listened to whoever was speaking to her. "Who is that?" I asked my colleague Thomas, nudging him discreetly. "Sarah Crawford," he replied. "Marketing director at Meridian Group. Brilliant reputation. Single, as far as I know, though not for lack of suitors." I waited for the right moment, then manufactured a casual introduction through a mutual acquaintance. Up close, she was even more striking, not just physically beautiful, but radiating intelligence and wit. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "James Mitchell," I introduced myself. "Westbrook Financial." "Ah, the competition," she smiled, revealing a slight dimple in her right cheek. "Should I guard my industry secrets, Mr. Mitchell?" That first conversation lasted nearly 2 hours, moving from the crowded ballroom to a quieter corner by the hotel's magnificent fireplace. We discovered we had both attended Northwestern University, though she had graduated 3 years after me. We shared a love for obscure independent films, had both recently read and loved the same historical novel about ancient Rome, and confessed to a mutual guilty pleasure of watching reality cooking shows. Our professional worlds were perfectly aligned. Both of us were ambitious, career-focused, and climbing similar corporate ladders, albeit at competing firms. She had a sharp mind for business strategy and spoke passionately about the marketing campaigns she'd developed for luxury brands. "Most men are intimidated by women with strong opinions on investment portfolios," she remarked with a subtle smile. As the evening drew to a close, "Most men are idiots," I replied, earning a genuine laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners that I asked for her number before the night ended, half expecting her to politely decline. Instead, she took my phone, entered her information, and handed it back with, "I'm free Wednesday evening. There's a new exhibition at the Art Institute I've been wanting to see." Our first date at the Art Institute led to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park, which led to weekend brunches, evening walks along Lake Michigan, and increasingly frequent overnight stays at each other's apartments. Sarah lived in a modern high-rise in River North, while I had a more modest condo in Wicker Park. What impressed me most about Sarah was her ambition coupled with genuine warmth. She worked tirelessly on her marketing campaigns, but always made time to ask about my day. She maintained close relationships with her parents in Madison, Wisconsin, calling them weekly and visiting for holidays. She volunteered monthly at a women's shelter, helping residents prepare for job interviews. 6 months into our relationship, I was promoted to senior financial analyst, with a substantial salary increase. Sarah organized a surprise celebration dinner, inviting close friends and colleagues to an upscale steakhouse. "I've never had someone believe in my success as much as you do," I told her that night as we shared a taxi home. After dating for a year, I proposed during a weekend trip to Door County, Wisconsin. I had arranged a private sunset sailing trip on Lake Michigan, hiding the ring in a vintage compass I had bought specifically for the occasion. "I've found my true north," I told her, opening the compass to reveal the diamond ring nestled inside. "Sarah Crawford, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, whispering, "Yes," before I could even finish asking. The captain of our sailboat popped a bottle of champagne I had arranged beforehand, and we toasted to our future as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Our wedding, 10 months later, was an intimate affair at the Chicago Botanic Garden, with only 80 guests, mostly family and close friends. Sarah looked ethereal in a simple white silk gown, her hair adorned with small white flowers. Her father, a retired professor from the University of Wisconsin, gave a touching speech about watching his daughter grow into the remarkable woman she had become. My mother, widowed 5 years earlier, welcomed Sarah to our family with open arms. After a 2-week honeymoon exploring the Amalfi Coast in Italy, we returned to Chicago and began house hunting. Within 3 months, we found what Sarah called our forever home, a 4-bedroom colonial-style house in Lake Forest, a prestigious North Shore suburb. The house, built in the 1930s, featured original hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, and a spacious backyard with mature oak trees. The price was steep, but with both our salaries and my recent promotion, we could manage the mortgage comfortably. I can already imagine our future children playing in that yard, Sarah said as we toured the house for the second time. The thought of starting a family with her made my heart swell. That we moved in just before Christmas, spending the holiday season decorating our new home and hosting both sets of parents for an elaborate Christmas dinner that Sarah orchestrated perfectly. As we lay in bed that night, in our new master bedroom with moonlight streaming through the windows, Sarah whispered, "I've never been happier, James. This is everything I've ever wanted." I believed her, and for a while, it was everything I had ever wanted too. My career continued to flourish. The following spring, I was promoted again, this time to investment team leader, managing a portfolio of high-net-worth clients with combined assets exceeding $500 million. The new position came with greater responsibility, but also increased flexibility in my schedule and a compensation package that included substantial performance bonuses. Sarah, meanwhile, had grown restless at Meridian Group. "There's no room for advancement," she explained over dinner one evening. "The senior VPs are all men in their 50s who expect to retire from those positions." When she received an offer to head the marketing department at Horizon Tech, a rapidly growing tech startup in Chicago's West Loop, I supported her decision to accept it, even though it initially meant a slight pay decrease. "It's about the long-term potential," she explained. "Horizon could go public within 5 years. The equity options alone could be worth millions." We settled into married life with remarkable ease. Weekdays were busy with work, but we protected our weekends, exploring Chicago's neighborhoods, trying new restaurants, attending theater productions, and occasionally entertaining friends at our home. Every Sunday evening, we would cook dinner together and discuss our goals for the coming week. Sarah was particularly good at helping me navigate office politics, offering insightful perspectives on my colleagues' motivations. On our first anniversary, I surprised Sarah with a diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany's. She surprised me with first-class tickets to Bora Bora for a vacation the following month. We renewed our vows privately on the white sand beach of our overwater bungalow, promising again to cherish and support each other always. Looking back now, I wonder if any of it was real, or if Sarah was already playing a long game I couldn't see. The first hairline cracks in our seemingly perfect marriage appeared around our second anniversary. They were subtle at first, so faint that I constantly questioned whether I was imagining problems where none existed. It began with money. As a financial analyst, I maintained meticulous records of our expenses and investments. We had agreed early in our marriage to maintain separate personal accounts for discretionary spending while sharing a joint account for household expenses and savings for our future children's education. Each month, we would transfer predetermined amounts into the joint account to cover mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, and regular savings. In March, reviewing our monthly statements as usual, I noticed several cash withdrawals from the joint account that I couldn't account for. $200 from an ATM near Sarah's office, $350 from another near the Magnificent Mile shopping district, and $500 from a branch downtown. None of these withdrawals matched our usual spending patterns. When I casually mentioned these discrepancies over breakfast one Saturday morning, Sarah glanced up from her phone with a slightly furrowed brow. "That's odd," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "Must be some mistake with the bank. Or maybe you forgot about some expenses." "Possibly," I conceded, though I knew my memory for financial details was rarely wrong. It was literally what I did for a living. "I'll call the bank on Monday to check." Sarah quickly changed the subject, asking if I wanted to try the new French bistro that had opened in our neighborhood. Her enthusiastic description of the restaurant's reviews effectively derailed our conversation about the missing money. The bank confirmed that the withdrawals had been made using our joint account card, which only Sarah and I possessed. When I mentioned this to Sarah that evening, she seemed momentarily flustered. "Oh, I remember now," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I had to pay the caterer for that charity event I'm helping organize. It was a last-minute thing, and they only accepted cash. I meant to tell you, but got distracted with work. I'll write you a check from my personal account to replace it." The explanation seemed reasonable enough, though something about her delivery felt rehearsed. I noticed she didn't specify which charity event, and when I asked for details, her answers were uncharacteristically vague. "Just a small fundraiser for a women's education initiative," she said. "Nothing major." The check she wrote covered the withdrawals, so I let the matter drop. But the following month, similar unexplained withdrawals appeared again. This time, when I brought it up, Sarah became defensive. "James, I'm extremely busy at work right now. Can we not turn into those couples who nitpick each other's spending? The money came from my contributions to the joint account anyway." That wasn't entirely accurate. Our contributions were equal, regardless of our individual salaries. But her tone suggested this wasn't the time to correct her. Around the same time, Sarah's work schedule began to change. Horizon Tech had always demanded long hours from its employees, something I had accepted as part of startup culture. But now, Sarah regularly came home after 9 p.m., sometimes as late as 11 p.m., exhausted and often slightly irritable. "The Langtree project is killing me," she would explain, referencing a major client that Horizon was supposedly courting. "The CEO wants daily updates, and the design team keeps missing deadlines." One evening, I offered to bring dinner to her office, thinking it might be a nice surprise. Her reaction was strangely alarmed. "No, I mean, that's sweet, but we're in confidential strategy sessions. No outside visitors allowed," she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "Besides, it's a complete mess there right now. Construction in the lobby." After 2 years of marriage, I had developed a decent sense of when Sarah was being truthful. Something about her explanation didn't ring true, but I pushed the thought aside. Trust was the foundation of our relationship, after all. Then came the subtle changes in her appearance and habits. Sarah had always dressed well, but suddenly she was investing in new, more expensive clothes. Her regular hair appointments at a salon in our neighborhood were replaced by visits to a high-end stylist downtown. She joined a new gym near her office, despite the perfectly good fitness center we had in our community. "It's about networking," she explained when I asked about the new gym membership that cost 3 times what our local one did. "Half the tech executives in Chicago work out there. It's where deals happen these days." Her phone, once often left casually on countertops or coffee tables, became a closely guarded possession. She added a new password, and I frequently caught her angling the screen away when I walked into a room. Several times, I noticed her step outside to take calls, claiming they were sensitive work matters. One Sunday morning, while Sarah was in the shower, her phone buzzed repeatedly on the nightstand. Glancing over, I saw a text notification from someone named Jason W. with the preview. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday. When can we?" The rest was cut off. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, but resisted the urge to pick up her phone. Instead, I casually asked during breakfast, "Who's Jason from work? His name seems to come up a lot lately." Sarah's hand froze momentarily as she was bringing her coffee cup to her lips. It was a tiny gesture, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. "Jason Weber," she replied smoothly. "New business development director. We're working on the Langtree project together. Brilliant guy. Poached from Google last month." She took a deliberate sip of coffee. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. You've mentioned him a few times." "Have I?" she said with a small laugh. "I guess we have been spending a lot of time together on this project." Over the next few weeks, Jason's name seemed to appear in nearly every conversation about her workday. Jason suggested we take a different approach with the client, or Jason and I had to stay late to redo the presentation. Then, abruptly, she stopped mentioning him altogether. When I asked how the project with Jason was going, she gave short, nonspecific answers and quickly changed the subject. My suspicions grew when Sarah began attending what she called women's professional development events on Tuesday evenings. These had never been part of her schedule before, and when I asked about the content of these meetings, her descriptions were suspiciously generic. Just the usual networking stuff, she would say. Speaker presentations, business card exchanges, wine and cheese. One Tuesday evening, I called her office around 8 p.m., thinking she might still be there before her networking event. Her assistant answered and sounded confused. "Sarah left around 5:30 today," she said. "Pretty sure she mentioned something about dinner with you." I thanked her and hung up, the knot in my stomach tightening. When Sarah came home around 10:30 p.m., her cheeks flushed and hair slightly disheveled, I simply asked how her event was. "Great," she said brightly. A venture capitalist from New York spoke about women breaking into tech investment. "Really inspiring." I nodded and pretended to return my attention to the book I was reading, while my mind raced with possibilities I didn't want to acknowledge. For our third anniversary, I had planned a weekend getaway to a luxury resort in Door County, where I had proposed. Sarah seemed genuinely excited about the trip until 3 days before our departure, when she announced she couldn't go. "I'm so sorry, James. The Langtree presentation got moved up. If we land this client, it could mean a promotion for me. I can't miss it." She touched my arm softly. "Rain check? I promise we'll go next month." I swallowed my disappointment and agreed, suggesting we at least have a special dinner at home on our actual anniversary. She agreed enthusiastically, promising to be home by 7 p.m. on our anniversary. I left work early to prepare Sarah's favorite meal, filet mignon with truffle mashed potatoes and roasted asparagus. I set the dining room table with our wedding china, lit candles, and chilled a bottle of the champagne we had served at our wedding. At 7:30 p.m., Sarah texted that she was running late. At 9 p.m., she texted again. "Crisis at work. Presentation disaster. Don't wait up." I sat alone at our beautifully set table, watching the candles burn down as the elaborate meal grew cold. When I finally went to bed around midnight, Sarah still wasn't home. She slipped in sometime after 2 a.m., smelling faintly of unfamiliar cologne when she climbed into bed, pretending to believe I was asleep. The last thread of my denial snapped the next morning when I found a hotel key card in the pocket of her blazer while gathering clothes for dry cleaning. The card was from the Langham, a luxury hotel downtown, nowhere near her office or any legitimate meeting location for the Langtree client, which I had researched. Still, I said nothing. Some part of me needed more concrete evidence before confronting what increasingly seemed inevitable. And soon enough, that evidence would find me in the most unexpected way. The revelation of Sarah's true nature came not through her affair, which I had increasingly resigned myself to suspecting, but through something far more sinister. A calculated attack on my career and reputation. It was a Wednesday morning in early October, just over 3 years into our marriage. I had arrived at the office early to prepare for a client meeting when my assistant, Megan, appeared at my door with an unusual expression, part concern, part professional distance. "James, Mr. Harrington would like to see you in his office." "Immediately," she said, referring to Richard Harrington, the firm's managing director and my director. From there, the emails documented their evolving scheme in clinical detail. Sarah had provided Jason with my work schedule, login habits, even screenshots of my password manager that I'd foolishly left open on our home computer. They had hired someone, referred to only as K, who specialized in financial system intrusions. The plan had been in motion for months, with Sarah systematically gathering the information Jason's contact needed. The most recent emails discussed the final phase, Sarah filing for divorce after I was formally charged, using my alleged criminal activity to invalidate our prenuptial agreement and claim the majority of our assets, including my inheritance from my father, which had been specifically protected in our prenup. There was also discussion of their future together once the divorce was finalized. They had already looked at properties in Boston, where Jason had been offered a position at a venture capital firm. Sarah would join him there after extracting maximum value from our marriage. I felt as if I were reading about strangers. The calculating coldness in Sarah's messages bore no resemblance to the woman I thought I had married. One particular exchange hammered this home. "Jason, any regrets about this? You've been with him for years." Sarah, "James was always a stepping stone. Good provider, decent reputation, trusting to a fault. I've invested 4 years in this relationship. I deserve a proper return. Fighting through the shock and betrayal, I realized I needed to preserve this evidence. I forwarded the most incriminating emails to my personal account, then took screenshots of others, being careful to include the complete email headers showing the authentic sender information. After returning the tablet exactly as I had found it, I retreated to our guest bedroom and sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I had discovered. The woman I had loved, built a life with, planned a future with, had been methodically plotting my professional and personal destruction. My initial impulse was confrontation, to call Sarah immediately and demand explanations. But as the shock began to subside, a colder, more strategic part of my mind took control. If I confronted Sarah now, she would simply accelerate her plans or find a way to cover her tracks. The evidence I had might not be legally admissible if I had accessed her tablet without permission. No, I needed to be as calculating as she had been. I needed to build an airtight case not only to clear my name professionally, but to protect myself from her scheme. Sarah had unwittingly taught me an important lesson. Trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls that would change the course of everything to follow. The first was to Michael Davies, a college friend who now worked in digital forensics for a major cybersecurity firm. "I need your help," I told him after explaining the situation. "And I need absolute discretion." The second call was to Rebecca Chun, a private investigator recommended by Michael. "I need surveillance on 2 individuals," I explained. "Documentation of their meetings, conversations if possible, and any evidence of conspiracy." The final call was to Alan Reynolds, widely regarded as one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in Illinois. His exorbitant hourly rate would be worth every penny. "Mr. Mitchell," Reynolds said after I had laid out my situation, "what your wife has attempted is not just grounds for divorce. It's criminal conspiracy and fraud. If you're willing to be patient and follow my guidance precisely, we can ensure she receives everything she deserves, in the legal sense of the term." As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The man who had woken up yesterday, trusting, perhaps naive, deeply in love with his wife, no longer existed. In his place was someone colder, more determined, and infinitely more dangerous to those who had underestimated him. Sarah had planned my destruction with meticulous care. Now I would return the favor, with interest. The next 3 weeks became an exercise in compartmentalization and strategic planning. On the surface, I maintained the appearance of a man struggling with the stress of being falsely accused, accepting Sarah's performative support while gathering intelligence and building my case. My first priority was clearing my name professionally. Through my attorney, I formally requested that Westbrook Financial review all security camera footage from my floor during the times the fraudulent transactions had occurred. Michael Davies, my digital forensics expert, provided a detailed technical analysis showing how my credentials could have been used remotely, despite the firm's security protocols. While this professional defense proceeded, I focused on documenting Sarah's betrayal and conspiracy. Rebecca Chun, the private investigator I had hired, delivered results with impressive efficiency. Within days, she provided photographs of Sarah and Jason meeting at various hotels and restaurants across Chicago, often during times Sarah had claimed to be at work events or networking functions. More valuably, Chun managed to obtain audio recordings of several conversations between them in public spaces, conversations that explicitly referenced their scheme against me. In one particularly damning recording from a restaurant near the Langham Hotel, Sarah could be clearly heard laughing about how James is so clueless while discussing the timeline for their divorce strategy. Chun also discovered that Jason Weber was not, in fact, the business development director at Horizon Tech, as Sarah had claimed. He was a consultant who had been brought in temporarily 6 months earlier and whose contract had been extended specifically at Sarah's request. His actual expertise was not in business development, but in cybersecurity, specifically financial systems security. This information proved crucial when I met with Elena Vasquez, Westbrook's chief compliance officer, to review the evidence for my defense. I carefully provided information about Jason's background without revealing how I had obtained it, suggesting that the firm's security team investigate possible connections between Weber and the unauthorized access to my accounts. Meanwhile, Alan Reynolds was building what he called an ironclad divorce case. The goal, he explained during one of our confidential meetings at his office, is not just to protect your assets, but to create such overwhelming evidence of conspiracy that Sarah will have no choice but to accept whatever settlement terms we dictate. Reynolds advised me to begin moving my personal assets, inheritance funds, separate investments made before marriage, family heirlooms, into protected accounts and secure storage that Sarah couldn't access. Do this gradually, he cautioned. We don't want to tip our hand. I also started quietly documenting our household finances, creating spreadsheets tracking Sarah's increasing personal expenditures, the unexplained withdrawals from our joint accounts, and discrepancies in her stated whereabouts versus credit card usage showing her actual locations. Michael Davies provided invaluable technical assistance, legally retrieving deleted browser history from our home computer showing Sarah's research on topics like how to invalidate a prenuptial agreement, divorce settlements with criminal spouse, and transferring assets offshore. Throughout this period, maintaining a normal facade around Sarah became an exhausting psychological exercise. Each morning, I would kiss her goodbye as she left for work, knowing she was likely meeting with Jason or her divorce attorney. Each evening, I would listen to her fabricated stories about her day, nodding sympathetically while mentally cataloging each lie. The investigation at your firm is taking so long, she would say with perfectly feigned concern. Maybe we should consider legal representation for you? I can ask around at Horizon. Thank you, I would reply, matching her false sincerity with my own. But the firm's attorneys are handling it for now. They seem confident this will all be cleared up soon. This last part, at least, was true. By the end of the third week, Westbrook's investigation had uncovered evidence supporting my innocence. Security footage clearly showed that I was in client meetings or away from my desk during several of the fraudulent transactions. The IT security team had discovered unusual access patterns to my accounts originating from IP addresses unconnected to my devices. Elena Vasquez called me personally to inform me that the internal investigation was now focused on external system compromise rather than employee misconduct. We're working with federal authorities now, she explained. This appears to be a sophisticated attack targeting not just our firm, but specifically your accounts. I expressed appropriate gratitude for their thoroughness while carefully avoiding any mention of Sarah or Jason. The criminal investigation needed to proceed independently of my personal knowledge to ensure its legitimacy. With my professional reputation on the path to restoration, I focused on fortifying my personal and financial position. Following Reynolds' advice, I created a separate bank account at a different institution where I began depositing my paychecks instead of our joint account secured important documents, birth certificate, passport, financial records, in a safe deposit box. Sarah couldn't access cataloged and photographed all valuable items in our home, particularly those with sentimental or family significance. Changed my passwords on all personal accounts. Using complex credentials, Sarah couldn't. Guess installed a small, unobtrusive security camera in my home office to document if Sarah attempted to access my personal computer. Perhaps most importantly, I started building a support network of trusted friends and family who could provide both emotional support and, if necessary, testimony about our relationship. I reconnected with my college roommate, now a psychology professor, who helped me process the emotional trauma of Sarah's betrayal without compromising my strategic position. I spent more time with my mother, who had always had slight reservations about Sarah that she had politely kept to herself. I never wanted to say anything, my mother admitted during a private lunch, but there was always something calculated about the way she related to our family, like she was performing rather than connecting. I also consulted with a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma, being careful to select someone with no previous connection to either Sarah or myself, and whom Sarah would have no way of discovering. I was seeing. Throughout this preparation phase, Sarah continued her affair with Jason, growing slightly less careful as she became increasingly confident in their scheme. Twice, she claimed to be staying overnight at business retreats that Rebecca Chun documented as romantic evenings at luxury hotels with Jason. The most difficult moment came when Sarah suggested we try for a baby. We had discussed starting a family since before our marriage, but had agreed to wait until both our careers were stable. Now, with obvious calculation, she brought it up one evening over dinner. I've been thinking, she said, reaching for my hand across the table. Maybe. It's time we started our family. With everything you're going through professionally, it might give us something positive to focus on. The cruelty of this manipulation, suggesting we create a child together while actively working to destroy me, was breathtaking. It took every ounce of self-control to smile and say, "That's a big decision. Let's wait until this work situation is fully resolved." I wouldn't want that stress affecting a pregnancy. Sarah's momentary flash of frustration confirmed my suspicion. A pregnancy would have further complicated the divorce proceedings and potentially increased her claim on my assets. By the 8th week of my administrative leave, too significant. Developments accelerated my timeline. First, Westbrook Financial's investigation had conclusively cleared me of any wrongdoing. Richard Harrington called personally to inform me that I was being reinstated with full back pay and a formal apology. The federal investigation had identified the actual perpetrators, though he couldn't share specific details due to the ongoing nature of the case. Second, Rebecca Chun called with urgent news. Sarah and Jason had accelerated their timeline. "They've booked one-way tickets to Boston for next Friday," she reported. "And Sarah withdrew $50,000 from your joint investment account yesterday. She's meeting with her attorney tomorrow morning." The chess game was reaching its crucial phase. Sarah was preparing to make her move, unaware that I had already countered it several moves in advance. It was time to execute the final stage of my plan. Alan Reynolds agreed when I called him with the update. "We need to move now," he confirmed. "I've prepared all the necessary documents. We can file first thing tomorrow morning." That evening, I returned home with a carefully constructed demeanor of dejection. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner, an unusual occurrence that immediately put me on alert. "Rough day," she asked, her voice filled with practiced concern as she stirred what smelled like my favorite pasta dish. "The investigation isn't going well," I lied, slumping into a chair at the kitchen island. "They're talking about possible criminal charges." Now, Sarah's eyes widened with what appeared to be shock, but I caught the momentary flicker of satisfaction before she masked it with concern. "Oh, James, that's terrible. What are we going to do?" "I don't know." I sighed heavily. "I might need to liquidate some investments to cover legal fees. The attorney thinks this could drag on for months." "Whatever you need," Sarah said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "We're in this together." The tenderness of her gesture, knowing it was completely fraudulent, almost broke my composure. This woman who had shared my bed, my home, my life for years was actively rejoicing in my apparent downfall. The depth of her deception was still staggering to comprehend. "Actually," I said, forcing vulnerability into my voice, "there is something you could do. The attorneys need our full financial records for the defense strategy. All the investment account statements are in that locked file cabinet in my office. The key is in my desk drawer. Could you pull those tomorrow while I'm meeting with the legal team?" "Of course," Sarah replied instantly. "Anything to help." What I didn't tell her was that the small camera I had installed in my office would record her accessing far more than just the investment statements, specifically my computer and personal files, exactly as Michael Davies had predicted she would do once given the opportunity. "I'm not feeling very hungry," I said, standing from the kitchen island. "I think I'll take a shower and turn in early." Sarah's disappointment was visible. She had clearly planned a particular performance for the evening that I was now derailing. "Are you sure? I made your favorite." "Maybe I'll have some later," I replied, already heading for the stairs. "I just need some time to process everything." In our bedroom, I quietly packed an overnight bag with essentials, then slipped it into my car while Sarah was still in the kitchen. After a perfunctory shower, I claimed exhaustion and went to bed early, lying awake in the darkness as Sarah moved around the house. Around midnight, I heard the distinctive sound of her phone vibrating, followed by her whispered voice from the hallway. "Yes, he totally bought it." "No, he has no idea." "Yes, tomorrow after he leaves." I closed my eyes as she slipped back into the bedroom, maintaining the steady breathing of deep sleep as she settled into bed beside me for what would be the last time at 5:30 a.m. I rose quietly, dressed, and left the house before Sarah woke. Taking one final look at the home we had built together, a beautiful facade hiding a foundation of lies. By 8 a.m., I was in Alan Reynolds' office, signing the divorce petition that would be filed with the court that morning. Reynolds had prepared a devastatingly comprehensive case, including documented evidence of Sarah's affair with Jason Weber, financial records showing Sarah's systematic siphoning of funds from our joint accounts, email evidence of their conspiracy to frame me for financial fraud, audio recordings of Sarah and Jason discussing their plans to invalidate our prenuptial agreement, reports from Rebecca Chun documenting their meetings and activities, technical analysis from Michael Davies showing how my professional credentials had been compromised. Once this is filed, Reynolds explained, it becomes public record. Her attorney will receive service of the petition by noon. Given the evidence we've compiled, I expect they'll reach out immediately to discuss settlement terms rather than risk this going to trial. And the criminal aspect? I asked. I've prepared a separate package for the district attorney's office, Reynolds replied. Financial fraud and conspiracy charges will be their decision, but the evidence is compelling. By 10 a.m., everything was in motion. I checked into a hotel downtown under a reservation made by Reynolds' office to ensure Sarah couldn't locate me when she discovered what was happening. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal, grief washing over me in waves as I sat alone in the impersonal hotel room. My phone buzzed at 12:37 p.m. A text from Rebecca Chun. Target received service of documents at 12:15. Currently making multiple phone calls. Surveillance continuing. At 1:22 p.m., the first call came from Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. In total, she called 11 times in the span of an hour, each voicemail more frantic than the last, evolving from confusion to anger to desperate pleading. James, there's been some mistake. Call me immediately. What the hell is this? You're filing for divorce? You need to call me now. James, please, this is all a misunderstanding. Whatever you think you know isn't the whole story. I love you. Call me back. The final voicemail, left around 3 p.m., was simply Sarah sobbing. All pretense abandoned. At 3:45 p.m., Alan Reynolds called. Her attorney reached out. He reported with professional satisfaction. They're requesting an emergency meeting to discuss settlement terms. I believe the phrase, willing to be reasonable, was used, which in my experience means they're in full retreat. And Jason? I asked. Apparently, he's suddenly unreachable. According to my sources, he emptied his condo and left town this morning, without Sarah. The coward had abandoned her at the first sign of trouble, just as I had predicted. To Reynolds weeks earlier, Jason had been using Sarah just as she had been using me, a pattern of exploitation that would have eventually been turned against her once I was out of the picture. At 5 p.m., I finally answered a call from Sarah. How could you do this? She demanded, her voice raw from crying. How long have you known? Who told you? You did, I replied calmly. Every lie, every unexplained absence, every password carelessly left visible. You weren't as clever as you thought, Sarah. James, please, she begged, her tone shifting to the manipulative warmth I had once found so convincing. We can work through this. Everyone makes mistakes. What we have is worth saving. What we had never existed. I corrected her. It was a performance from the beginning. An investment, I believe you called it. Well, investments sometimes fail spectacularly. The emails, she whispered, the fight draining from her voice. You saw the emails, and the text messages, and the hotel receipts, and the offshore account documents. I have it all, Sarah. What do you want? She asked finally, defeated. My attorneys will be in touch with yours. I suggest you cooperate fully. The alternative will be unpleasant. Jason's gone, she said after a moment of silence. He took everything. I'm not surprised, I replied. Men like that always run when things get difficult. And men like you, she asked, a trace of her old defiance returning. Men like me, I said slowly. Remember everything and forgive nothing. Goodbye, Sarah. I ended the call and blocked her number, closing that chapter of my life with clinical finality. The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed, largely due to Sarah's decision to accept a settlement rather than face a public trial where all evidence of her conspiracy would become public record. Her surrender was nearly total. She relinquished all claims to our marital home. She forfeited any right to my retirement accounts or investments. She returned the jewelry and gifts I had given her throughout our relationship. She signed a non-disclosure agreement preventing her from discussing our marriage or divorce. She agreed to pay a portion of my legal fees in exchange She avoided criminal prosecution for her role in the financial fraud scheme. Though Jason Weber wasn't so fortunate. Federal authorities arrested him in Seattle 3 weeks later as he attempted to board a flight to Hong Kong. He now faced multiple felony charges for wire fraud, computer crimes, and conspiracy. Professionally, my reputation was fully restored. Westbrook Financial not only reinstated me, but offered a promotion to senior vice president in recognition of the extraordinary stress and unfair treatment I had endured. Richard Harrington personally apologized for doubting my integrity, acknowledging that the evidence against me had been quite convincing. That was precisely the point, I explained during a private conversation in his office. The conspiracy was designed to be believable because it targeted someone with access to exactly the systems involved. Without your thorough investigation, it might have succeeded. The financial industry publications that had initially reported on my administrative leave and the investigation now published follow-up articles clearly establishing my innocence and detailing the sophisticated attack that had targeted the firm through my credentials. Several security conferences invited me to speak about the experience from a risk management perspective. Throughout the divorce process, I maintained a dignified silence in public, refusing to discuss the details even with close colleagues. Privately, I worked with a therapist to process the profound betrayal and rebuild my capacity for trust. The emotional wounds were deep, but I was determined not to let Sarah's actions define my future ability to connect with others. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I sold our Lake Forest house, unable to continue living in a space so filled with false memories. I purchased a loft in Chicago's West Loop, a modern, open space with no associations to my previous life. The process of furnishing it, selecting each piece myself, arranging everything according to my own preferences without compromise, became an unexpectedly therapeutic exercise in reclaiming my identity that I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage, rebuilt relationships with family members, and gradually reestablished a social life independent of the couple-centric world Sarah and I had inhabited. I discovered activities I enjoyed that I had abandoned for Sarah's preferences: jazz concerts, mountain biking, volunteer work with a literacy program for disadvantaged youth. My mother, visiting my new home for the first time, remarked on the change in me. "You seem more yourself than you have in years," she observed as we sat on my balcony overlooking the city. "More authentic somehow." "I am," I replied, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. For 4 years, I was living someone else's idea of who I should be. Now I'm just me again. A year after the divorce, I received an unexpected email from Sarah's former assistant at Horizon Tech. She had left the company shortly after Sarah's departure and wanted me to know certain facts that had never come to light during the legal proceedings. According to her account, Sarah had engaged in similar manipulative relationships throughout her career, using charm and calculated intimacy to advance professionally or extract benefits from colleagues, superiors, and subordinates alike. Her relationship with me had been her most ambitious project, a long-term investment designed to secure financial stability while she pursued her actual ambitions. "I thought you should know you weren't the first," the assistant wrote. "Though, you were certainly the one who handled it most effectively. There's a certain justice in knowing she lost everything she'd spent years manipulating to acquire." I thanked her for the information, but chose not to respond further. Sarah now occupied an increasingly small space in my thoughts, a cautionary lesson rather than an active presence. As for Sarah herself, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had left Chicago, taking a significantly lower position at a small marketing firm in Phoenix. Jason Weber had apparently implicated her more extensively in his plea deal than she had anticipated, rendering her effectively unemployable in Chicago's corporate circles where the story had traveled widely through professional networks. Occasionally, I would receive notification of another woman viewing my profile on professional networking sites, using aliases I recognized as Sarah's typical usernames. I knew she was tracking my continued success from afar, perhaps wondering how the man she had so completely underestimated had not only survived her betrayal but emerged stronger. If there was a final lesson in the experience, it was one I reflected on sometimes during quiet evenings on my balcony, watching the Chicago skyline illuminate as darkness fell. Trust, once broken, can never be fully restored, but neither should it be permanently abandoned. The art lies in developing a more nuanced understanding of human nature, recognizing that people are capable of both genuine connection and calculated deception, that I had loved Sarah completely, trusting her without reservation. That trust had been catastrophically misplaced, but the capacity for such trust remained one of my fundamental strengths. The challenge now was to balance that capacity with wisdom earned through painful experience. 3 years after my divorce, at a charity auction for the literacy program where I volunteered, I met Elizabeth Reeves, a children's book editor with quick wit and thoughtful insights. Our conversation flowed effortlessly throughout the evening, touching on books, travel, architecture, and a dozen other topics. As the event ended, Elizabeth asked if I'd like to continue our conversation over coffee sometime. I hesitated briefly, old caution flaring, before accepting. "I should warn you," I said as we exchanged numbers. "I ask a lot of questions." Elizabeth smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that seemed genuinely warm. "That's fine," she replied. "I've found that people who ask questions are usually the best listeners. And listening is how we really get to know someone." Whether this new connection would develop into friendship, romance, or something else entirely remained to be seen. But for the first time since Sarah's betrayal, I felt ready to discover the answer, one careful, authentic step at a time. The man who had once trusted blindly was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, wiser, and far more difficult to deceive. A man who remembered everything, forgave rarely, and never made the same mistake twice. Sarah had intended our relationship to be my downfall. Instead, it had become my most difficult and valuable education. 5 years after the divorce, I received a handwritten letter postmarked from a small town in New Mexico. The return address was unfamiliar, but I recognized Sarah's distinctive handwriting immediately. For several days, the unopened envelope sat on my desk, a remnant from a past I had worked hard to move beyond. Eventually, curiosity prevailed, and I carefully opened it one evening after returning from dinner with Elizabeth, now my fiancée. Sarah's letter was unexpectedly reflective, lacking the manipulation that had characterized our last interactions. "James, I've written this letter many times in my mind over the years. Each version seemed inadequate, which is why it's taken me so long to actually put pen to paper. This isn't an attempt to reconcile or re-enter your life. I understand those bridges were burned completely by my actions. Instead, I'm writing because, after years of therapy and painful self-examination, I felt you deserved to hear certain truths from me. That I was diagnosed 2 years ago with narcissistic personality disorder. The diagnosis wasn't surprising, my therapist had suggested it much earlier, but my acceptance of it was long in coming. Understanding this aspect of myself helped clarify the patterns that defined our relationship and my behavior throughout my life. This isn't offered as an excuse. Mental health conditions explain behavior, but don't justify it. What I did to you was calculated, cruel, and unforgivable. I systematically exploited your capacity for love and trust, treating them as weaknesses when they were actually your greatest strengths. For what little it might be worth after everything, I am deeply sorry. Not just for the concrete actions of betrayal, the affair, the financial conspiracy, the lies, but for the fundamental violation of what should have been sacred between us. You offered authentic love. I returned strategic manipulation. I won't ask your forgiveness, as I haven't earned it and suspect I never could. Instead, I simply want you to know that your response, the methodical, dignified way you exposed my betrayal while maintaining your integrity, forced me to eventually face myself in ways I had avoided my entire life. The person I was when we were married would never have written this letter. She would have maintained her victim narrative indefinitely, blaming circumstances or others for her own deliberate choices. The fact that I can now acknowledge my responsibility represents the only positive outcome of the destruction I caused. That I heard through former colleagues that you're engaged. I wish you and your fiancé happiness and, more importantly, the authentic partnership that I was incapable of providing. Sarah, I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope, experiencing a complex mix of emotions. Not the raw pain of before, but a quieter recognition of human fragility and the damage we can inflict on each other. Later that night, as Elizabeth slept beside me, I contemplated Sarah's letter and the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal had changed me fundamentally, making me both more cautious and, paradoxically, more authentic in my connections with others. With Elizabeth, I had been transparent about my past from our third date, sharing the experience not as a dramatic revelation, but as an important chapter in my development. Her response, thoughtful questions, genuine empathy, and a remarkable absence of judgment toward either Sarah or myself had confirmed what I already sensed about her character. Our relationship had developed slowly, deliberately, with careful attention to building genuine trust through consistency and honesty. Where Sarah had been performative, Elizabeth was authentic. Where Sarah concealed, Elizabeth revealed. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or healing. As dawn approached, I made a decision about Sarah's letter. I wouldn't respond there. Was nothing more to say between us, but neither would I discard it. It would remain as a reminder, not of betrayal's pain, but of resilience's power. The experience with Sarah had nearly destroyed me, professionally and personally. Instead, it had forged something stronger through the breaking, teaching me to distinguish between authentic connection and its carefully crafted imitation. In the soft morning light, I watched Elizabeth sleeping peacefully beside me and felt a profound gratitude for the journey, painful as it had been, that had led me here. Sarah had intended to be my destruction, but had instead unwittingly guided me toward a life more genuine than the carefully constructed illusion we had shared. Sometimes, I reflected, our greatest falls from grace become our most crucial steps toward authenticity. In losing everything I thought mattered, I had finally discovered what truly did. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life accounts of betrayal and its consequences. Remember, these stories are shared, not to promote vengeance, but to illustrate the human capacity for resilience in the face of profound betrayal. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.